You
them.
mentioned about in terms of having a poor or a bad training session and how it can sort of have a psychological impact on you. And at the towards the end of last year, because I've been following you for a little while, I saw that you had an intercostal injury, which
Mm.
obviously affected your ability to train. How did you find that impacted you psychologically, given that, especially if one, training session could throw you off a little bit? How did you find that process? Obviously, there's the physical rehab to it too, but how did it
Yeah,
affect you mentally and your sort of thought process coming into Ironman NZ this year?
yeah, that specifically was yeah, that happened let's say Christmas Eve actually.
Oh
Um,
man.
and I had a race mid-Jan, which we were hoping to get some good prep for.
Mm.
So that was a bit of a speed bump in that prep. And that kind of came at the back end of a real rough 2023 for me, back end
Yeah.
of that, and I don't mean physically, I mean sort of mentally.
Mm.
First year pro, the first half of the year went really well, and then from there downhill. I wouldn't say downhill, but I learned a lot in the back end of 2023, with a number of things going on, and then came home after a bit of travel end of last year. December was all lined up to race in Taupo in December and got COVID sort of 10 days before, couldn't race
Oh,
that. So that was
man.
another kicker. And then, yeah, came out of that race going, right, towering is on the cards now. And then came up with, yeah, the intercostal strain, which particularly, I guess your question, going back to your question of how did that affect, I guess, my physiological state or, psychological
Mhm.
state,
Yeah, yeah,
through that time. And I guess where we positioned it was like I'd had quite a lot of I wouldn't say trauma, but a lot going on, which was affecting my racing.
yeah.
So this was just another thing that came up, and it was kind of a make or break thing to go. We can stop training here, let the injury recover, and be good with it, and then come back.
Mhm.
Or we can make a plan here to work with what we've got, but try and make the best out of the bad situation, if that makes sense, and
Yeah.
still do my job essentially, because that's what it
Mm.
is.
Yeah.
So we went for the latter option of that, and obviously there was a bit of planning involved. But yeah, from that state of processing that, it was just going, you know what, if I can get through this and prove to myself that actually this is not a big block, it's just something that I can work with, then it's another notch in the belt type thing. And
Mm.
it did prove to be that way. There was, I just had to look at what silver linings I could take from that injury. There were lots of, other aspects of gaining a lot of bike fitness. I was bound to the trainer for weeks on end,
Yeah.
not being able to ride on the road, not being able to swim, and super limited on the running side of things, which ideally, if you look at it going into a race, was not ideal race prep.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it was what it was, and actually turned out to have a okay race and set up a real nice base for leading into this Ironman prep. So yeah,
Mm. Man, kudos to you for pushing through that. I could only imagine how it must have felt like, I don't know, the last straw or something. When you're going through a tough slog, shit, hit another barrier, and then like
yeah,
something else happens again. Like that must have taken a lot of, I don't know, mental toughness and like mental fortitude to push through it. What sounded like quite a pivotal moment too. It's almost like
mm,
you. I'm not sure. Maybe this isn't how you viewed it, but it sounds like the way you articulated it. It's like if I choose to still continue, it's like you're choosing for the snowball to go that way and improve and still get better versus like, oh no, I'll put my foot on the brakes and like I'll just recover. It's almost like the snowball could have gone the other way where like, oh, I'll just continue to rest and continue to rehab and like not focus on getting better.
yeah, totally. Yeah, you don't want that snowball to get too big. Um, like I guess I reflect on what has been my lowest point in the sport so far. And that came in November last year, um, in a half Ironman race in Melbourne actually, and I didn't finish. Like, I DNF'd. I got
Oh,
halfway through the bike, and just the whole, yeah, my head got to me and pulled out. And I actually remember saying, Mum was there. My mum came across for the race, and she
mhm.
was there supporting, and she copped all of it actually. I remember saying to
Oh,
her right
oh
after I
no.
pulled out and walked out of transition, I said, I'm not good enough for this sport anymore. I said, these guys are better than
Yeah.
me. And I said a whole bunch of words, but I said, this is too effing hard, this sport.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's definitely points, and I look back and I go, that was definitely my last point. There was a few things contributing to that.
Mhm.
But yeah, how I got out of that was with I got a really good support network around me, friends, family, coach, partner, mum, dad, and it was just making some really pivotal point decisions to go, actually, that's a moment. Um, I need to accept that, and if we try and ignore that, then that's probably not the right thing to do. We need to
Mhm.
acknowledge it and go, how can we make some changes that are going to prevent us getting here again, because we don't want to get here again.
Yeah.
And we did. Like, I came home. I've been away from home for a good period of time. Got back into some routine. Um, Found the enjoyment again in the sport, and I think we just pushed a little bit hard going into that race. And didn't wasn't not enjoying the sport, but just again created some aspects where I found um, the enjoyment in what I was doing.
Mm. Do you think having the ability to push through those kind of things and still have that mindset of seeking solutions and wanting to fix it and get better and extract the learnings from it is kind of helping you look ahead into the future and gonna help you through those tough moments again when they I don't know if it's inevitable, touch wood, but I feel like there's almost inevitable there'll be tough moments again. But do you think that kind of has made you more well equipped to tackle those situations?
Yeah, totally. And I'd say it definitely gives you resource and tools that you can
Mm,
use. But what I think it probably gives, if I'm talking from my perspective, um, it gives me the confidence to go, I got through that. Um, I'm now faced with this,
mhm.
on a scale of, degree of how severe is this. Um, I can actually get through this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that's not too confusing.
No, that's the power of data, man, and that's the power of like actually doing the thing, right? Like I've done the thing
Mm,
before, and I'm still here, and I got through it. Therefore, I have the data to back up my thinking that I have the ability to do it again.
100%. Yeah. Like
Yeah,
the scale of, at the moment, at that point in time, it feels like everything and anything, right?
yeah,
It's so massive. And then you look back today and you go, oh, yeah, well, at that point in time, it felt like everything. But relatively speaking, we've moved on. We're here. I've
yeah.
done this much between A and B, and look where we are now. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, when you approach friction in other kind of ways, maybe not on such a big scale. Let's think more like a really relatable one is having to do a training session that you don't want to do, which unless you're like a robot, I'm sure that probably happens reasonably frequently. How do you kind of talk to yourself into still doing that, and how do you approach those things when you don't want to do them?
Mm. Definitely occurs. Like, there's a lot of days where you don't really want to get out the door, or the session is tough,
Yeah.
um, and it's like, well, the easy option is to not.
Hmm.
Um, but if you put your thought process, over the top of that session, let's say it's in a session, for example, how am I going to feel if I don't do that? You know,
Yeah.
um, there's some accountability, and I think I feel like I personally have high expectations and high standards of myself, and I've got to be accountable for what I do. So I want to go to bed every night knowing that I've given the best that I can in that particular day. And that doesn't necessarily mean the whole, no pain, no gain type thing. I have to hurt every day, but
Mm,
I need to know that I've given my best for that day and whatever that was. So I think just reminding yourself of what that is, even if there is that hard session, or even if it is not a super sunny day and it's miserable outside and you still got to get outdoors. Yeah, it's an accountability thing, and
mhm,
knowing that actually there's a micro to everything. It's like that every session does count regardless of what it is. In the
mm,
big scheme of things, that's kind of where I like to kind of put things in the
yeah.
scheme of it. It's like this is contributing, and if I don't do it, then sure, I'll get away with it and I can make up some excuse.
Mm,
Um, but being truthful and honest to what you actually want to achieve, like I want to be the best that I can be. So
mhm,
yeah, just having that determination through that. But there's definitely days where it falls, and
yeah,
not to say that you don't do what you need to, but making the start is the hardest thing. You just got to go actually by the end of it. Um, I should feel good by the end of it, and
mm,
actually taking the time to go. If you do finish that session and you probably weren't that keen to start it, just taking 5 minutes to reflect on it and go, this is actually how I felt beforehand. Acknowledge and praise yourself that you did the session, you got through it, but just reminding yourself that that is a thing
yeah,
before, and that's how you felt, and this is
yeah.
where I am now, and I got it done.
I
Doesn't
love
mean
your
you need to live.
philosophy and how you're able to see the the sessions as being wins as well. I feel like it would
Mm,
be easy to focus on the race, the race is when I'm going to feel good because I'm going to have completed it. But it's like you're going to have a lot of sessions coming up to that race, and if you have that mindset like you're discussing there, I can see how like each session that you complete, like that's a win, like that's an accomplishment in itself.
yeah, and it's living. Yeah, as I say, it's living session by session. It's not really about, you know, sure, 4 weeks out, I am thinking about the race, or 6 weeks out, I am thinking about the race, but it's about what am I doing here at this point in time? And
Mm,
today, what have I got to do today in order to get to my goal, which is racing? And then tomorrow, what does tomorrow bring? It's the same with racing. Your windows of how far you look forward or into are
yeah,
definitely a thing. By the end of it, by 38K, you're probably in 30-second windows as to what can I do in the next 30 seconds
mm,
to make that as good or as best of an athlete as I can. Whereas the first 2K on the bike, you're probably at like, right, what am I doing in the next half an hour? What have I got to do? So those
yeah,
windows
yeah.
get smaller and smaller. It's the same in training.